Welcome everybody to the Turnbuckle reimagining of an editorial piece that I used to do back in the day. This is going to be our new wrestling series with me and Dan. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. But the initial video that I wanted to do was to give you a little background into how I got started in the fandom and why I left it and why I came back and why I left it again and haven't watched it in a couple years. So I guess to start, back in the day, I was always fascinated with the little people of wrestlers. And my stepbrother at the time would always say, "Hey, Brad, come here." The WWF at the time were doing those matches. It was a thing. And yeah, that whole thing was kind of cool. And then he had the old action figures, the old WWF action figures. The arms and legs didn't move, not like the toys you find today in your local store. So the whole thing with that was, I would have been, this was back in the days of VHS tapes. Yeah, I would get more interested as time went on. I remember there was a video, a show coming on, a recap of the past year's Summer Slams, as they called them. And I just remember I recorded that and I just almost wore the tape onion skin thin rewatching that thing, because it was, they had the Macho Man and Elizabeth wedding, and they had the, I think it was to promote the SummerSlam 97 or 96 Heart and Soul, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of where it started, and I just became fascinated with it. The whole, me and my stepbrother at the time, Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, they were our jam. So my dad, I don't know if my dad, and he'll tell me, he'll see this, he'll tell me if he really was already into it. I know my pawpaw was, but I don't know as far as my dad how far into it he was, or if he just saw me so excited about it, it just kind of took over him as well, and he was keeping up with it as well. But we would go to, kids, I'm going to reference something that you have no idea what I'm about to reference, but you older guys in the crowd, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We used to go to a video store. And now, no, that's not the section in Walmart that's got the Blu-rays, or your Target, or your Best Buy, wherever popular videos are sold. No, these were like, in my hometown, Video 2000, I believe, was the main one. And they had a section for, athletics, fitness, and wrestling. So I was with my dad every other weekend, so we would go to the video store. I'd get a couple of video games, and I would get a wrestling tape or two if I really wanted to concentrate on the weekend, just being wrapped up in the stories. Mainly the tapes were pay-per-view tapes, so I didn't really have any sort of idea week to week what the stories were building up to the matches, but some of them would have recaps, which was cool. And some of them not. Either I'd get a couple of wrestling tapes in a game, or a couple of games in a wrestling tape, what have you. And I remember getting Bash at the Beach 1996, the Hostile Takeover. Now, if you don't know what that is, back in the day when I was a kid, that featured, and me and Dan will probably have our own separate Turnbuckle episode dedicated to this, the initial invasion of WWF talent into WCW, a la Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, coming in as the hostile takeover. Was the WWF really coming in, to try to get one over on Ted Turner's business? We didn't know. We were kids, but it was exciting nonetheless. So I remember that tape. Big Hogan fan, big Warrior fan. Coming up to watching the VHS tapes, not really watching the serialized TV series every Monday night. Main event, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, and their mystery partner versus Macho Man Randy Savage, Lex Luger, and my man Sting. Sting was, he was the coolest. And if I'm not mistaken, this was the first instance where he had the black and white makeup. I know they all had face paint on as show unity for WCW. And it had Bobby Heenan, Tony Schiavone, and Dusty Rhodes on commentary. Those three are my favorite commentary team. We'll probably have a separate turnbuckle for that too. Because I'd like to go in depth on this, on some of these at least. So main event time, Luger gets taken out of the match fairly early on. And the Outsiders eventually overtake Mach and Sting. And then to my shock and surprise, Hulk Hogan comes out. I was like, yeah, here we go. We got it. We know the story. Hogan drops the leg on Mach and tells Nash and Hall to get him. Of course, that night, they formed the New World Order. Mean Gene. So from that point forward, I was like, all right, I'm hooked. I got to figure out, what led up to this. So I started watching WCW Monday Nitro. Then you fast forward and, through 97, 98, I was mainly WCW. I started getting an interest in WWF right around the Montreal Screwjob. Survivor Series in September. I believe that, of course, that was the infamous Bret Hart gets screwed by Vince. He goes for a submission. He gets countered by Shawn. The ref, is like, ring the bell. And the ref, he just rings the bell out of nowhere. And I'm sure we'll have a separate turnbuckle for that as well. So then I would hear about that from WWF. I'm like, oh, well, WWF seems kind of, they seem kind of cool too. So I started channels flopping back and forth. And I would still maintaining a WCW guy up until the latter part of 1998. The match quality was really starting to go down, especially when you get to Halloween Havoc 1998, Hogan Warrior. The reason that's fresh in my mind, I was working earlier today, today being Sunday, and I was listening to 83 Weeks with Conrad Thompson and Eric Bischoff. That's their podcast, and I like listening to that. And it was the debut of Warrior on Monday Nitro, so that was fresh in my mind. But the main event of that pay-per-view, I'll remember, never forget, was Diamond Dallas Page versus Goldberg. And that match was fantastic. And my mom hollered at me because the show ran over. And back in that day, I'm going to give you another nugget, all right? Back in that day, we had what was called Prime Star. It was Prime Star and DirecTV, kind of like your Lowe's and your Home Depot, your Walmart and your Target, thing like that, your XM and your Sirius. Of course, those two would merge. DirecTV eventually bought out Prime Star. But right as Michael Buffer was announcing the Let's Get Ready to Rumble, cut to black. And I remember going, Ma, and just running and hollering. And I was like, what the hell happened? So I was just like, well, I'll just hit the go button. And that bought the pay-per-view twice. And she's never let me hear the end of that. So yeah, we get past Halloween Havoc. We get into World War III with Kevin Nash winning the 60-man 3-ring battle royal. And he's next to take on Goldberg at Starrcade 98. Of course, that's where Scott Hall came out with that cattle prod. Zap Goldberg, jackknife, 1, 2, 3, done. And the turning point for me was the main event, I forget the date, of Kevin Nash defending the WCW Heavyweight Championship against Hollywood Hogan, who was at the time running for president, but that was really the cover to get him off of TV because he was filming Thunder in Paradise. And for people like me and Dan and several others, just like when you hear Hogan's Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, some people think back to Woodstock. We think to That darn bad guy with the big gold belt with the NWO painted across it, just jamming out as he comes to the ring. So the match happens. We get our introductions out of the way, and they're squaring up. They're getting ready to go all over it. I'm a Wolfpack guy at the moment because Sting had joined the Wolfpack, and I was all in for NWO Wolfpack. So Hogan rears back like he's gonna punch, and then he slowly comes up, taps Nash in the chest. Nash goes down, 1, 2, 3. The wool was pulled all over our eyes. It was a ruse all along. Goldberg came out to try to break up the celebration. Of course, Hogan got the belt back. And then Luger came out to save Goldberg. Well, then he turned on Goldberg. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's where I kind of lost WCW. I'd still watch it. 99, 2000, and early 2001, before they went out of business, they had very, very, very small, bright moments. Very small. WWF, on the other hand, they had the Attitude Era. You had your Stone Cold Steve Austins. You had D-Generation X. Vince McMahon becoming the evil Mr. McMahon character. Triple H, The Rock. I mean, Mick Foley. You name it. They had talent. They had star. They had everything. So, fast forward to 2001. McMahon buys Nitro. Well, he buys WCW. And I remember I was either with my dad or he called, because at that time I would watch, say, WCW Nitro live this week, and he would tape Raw, and then when I was with him on the weekend, I would watch the Raw, or vice versa. And I was like, he's on the same channel. Why is he on the same channel? Because for like the past week, we kept hearing that after WCW Greed, which was their pay-per-view, that Monday from Tampa, Florida would be the season finale of Nitro. I was like, season finale? What does that mean? And back then, Prime Star had the little guide button. And you go in there and it went we flipped through a week to Monday night, 8 o'clock, WCW Nitro, live from Jacksonville, Florida, season finale. I was like, Dad, what does that mean? He goes, I don't know. It's weird, right? So there's McMahon right on both screens at the same time. So we move on from there. And it gets into the 2000s, which I'm still into it at this point. I get to go to a couple shows. After Eddie died, and after all the stuff with, I'm about to say a dirty word, Benoit happened, and the fact that the face that ran the place, Mr. Hustle, Loyalty, and Respect, was kind of giving off the old Hogan vibe, I was just done. I was done. So I didn't watch for a while. Then in 2010, I had, we'll just say, an incident that kind of, then something that happened to me. So after my incident, I was working at a radio station there, and shortly after my incident, I think it was October of that year, which was 2010, I moved on to the local hospital there, working in the emergency room as a patient registrar. I would primarily work the second shift, which was the 3 to 4 to 10 to 11-ish. And the lady, Deborah, who would come in and do the graveyard shift, the 11, 12 to 7. And I forget how it first came up, but she figured out that I was a really massive wrestling fan back in the day. And all the stuff is up here. She would pick my brain. She goes, well, do you remember this pay-per-view? What was the main event? And I would say, and I'd tell her. And she just picked my brain, and because she thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, it's up here. It's not getting used. If it makes somebody happy, who cares? So week in and week out, she would always tell me, oh, you've got to go back to it. This person did this. This person did this. He flew off of this. He said that. I said no. Cool, I guess. But I don't know these people. I don't know them. It's been that long. It's been almost like a generation skip. The names she was spouting out. Until we fast forward to 2011, till one Monday night in June. She comes in and she's like hustling, bustling, trying to get to me. She's like, oh, I didn't clock in. She goes to clock in and she comes back and she goes, oh, you're never gonna believe what just happened. Well, somebody's fresh off of Monday Night Raw. So she told me, she goes, I don't even want to tell you. You got to go watch it. It'll bring you back to wrestling. It'll bring you back to wrestling. And I said, no. She goes, I've pleaded with you. She said, you've never, ever listened to me before. You've just, please promise me when you leave here, you'll go watch it. I said, okay. If she's this excited about it, it must be something big or some announcement or somebody's coming back from the past that I may like. She didn't elaborate. So I went home, got on my PS3. This was like at midnight. And back then, PSN store, you could buy or rent the Monday Night Raw. So I just bought it. It was a couple of bucks. And I got finished downloading. And I texted her, I said, this show is 3 hours long. Where is it at so I can fast forward? She goes, no. Just watch the whole thing. You'll get the whole context. And I was like, I'm not watching 3 hours of wrestling. I don't have time. It's 12:15, 12:30. She goes, no, trust me. You'll. I was like, all right, fine. So I started watching it. It was from Las Vegas, what they were referring to as Raw Roulette. So all the matches or all that stuff was determined by a spin of the wheel. They all had different stipulations all over the wheel. And then the main event was John Cena versus R-Truth in a tables match. And towards the end of it, this guy ran out there who I had heard of years before. Back in the day when we were kids, when I was talking about the VHS tapes, we were tape traders. You know, we would, somebody would record this and somebody may have missed it. It's like, oh, well, you got to, Or there was a pay-per-view that, like say somebody didn't get to watch SummerSlam or WrestleMania that year. It's like, oh man, I really wish I could have saw it. It's like, oh, here's my WrestleMania tape, part 1 and 2. Because WrestleManias are long, VHS tapes, So we would do that. I had always heard of this guy that came out and interfered in the match. And R-Truth won. And Cena was laying there, broken through the table, broken through by a spear, I think, from R-Truth. And then the guy takes the microphone and Indian style just sits on the stage. This gentleman, Phil Brooks, CM Punk. He proceeds to lay down one of the, if not the best promos I had ever heard before or prior. And I texted her, I said, damn you, I got to see where this goes with this guy. So I became a massive CM Punk fan, starting 2011. So I was back in it. Oh, when I was back in it, I learned all the new guys' names. I was back into it. I had his Punk's t-shirts. I was fully back into it. You fast forward to the Royal Rumble 2015. Still a Punk guy. This is fresh off of his tag team with Daniel Bryan, the Beard and the Best, as they were called. They beat the Shield, the trio of Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns. I ain't forgot about you, buddy. We're going to have a whole turnbuckle dedicated to you, Jack. So, Royal Rumble time, I'm like, all right, it's been a while since Punk had the championship. He had that belt for 434 days, the 5th longest reign in WWF history. 434 days. The area code where I lived in Farmville was 434. I was like, how perfect was that? So, Royal Rumble time. He gets eliminated by Kane, unceremoniously, just dumped out of the ring. So I'm like, okay. So the next night on Raw, no Punk. None whatsoever. So this is now the internet dirt sheet era. So I'm scrambling like, what is going on? He walked out. He had had enough. And from what I now reflect on, I don't blame him. So then I jumped on the Daniel Bryan yes wagon. So Followed him up until WrestleMania 30, where he beat Triple H and he beat Randy Orton and Batista to become the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And he was out, and then I still kept up with it because he's coming back. He's coming back. Then he won the Intercontinental Championship at the next year's WrestleMania, and then he was out again on injury. And then he retired. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. So I hadn't watched in a while. I would hear things, especially I frequent comicbook.com at least once or twice a day just to either check the news early in the morning or after I'm done with everything. And they'll have wrestling stories on there, which is nice. Then I found my way onto Cage Side Seats, which their news is it's solely wrestling, and they go into a lot more depth than comicbook.com does. So I hear things. I've been watching YouTube since 2015. So, I mean, your Tyrone Magnuses, your Blind Wave, all those cats, I've been following them since 2015. So, of course, WWE would come into my recommendations and stuff like that. So I would catch stuff here and there. So then I met Dan, and I forget our first conversation. He could probably tell me when we actually sit down and we get his side of his origins with the sports story. And then we just immediately bonded with that. And then, we found out he was a comic book guy like me, like I was. So then me and Dan bonded over the wrestling and the comic books and all that stuff. And I started reading more and paying more attention to what would come up in my recommendations. I thought, well, let's have a wrestling show. I thought it'd be a nice contrast, especially when we're doing the current news, but really when we're going back and doing the spotlight episodes that we have planned, like your Finger Poke of Doom, Vince McMahon winning the WWF Championship, stuff like that, getting each of our unique perspectives. So this is just our introduction to the first Turnbuckle. We're glad you could join us, and we'll see you soon.